yourself and tell us the organization you're from. That would help me to familiarize myself with you all a little bit better. So I'm just going to go down my list and call names. If you could unmute yourself and let us know the organization you're with, that would be great. So I'm going to start with Lynn Lovelace.
Hi, I'm Lynn Lovelace, and I represent the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson.
Thank you. Dustin?
Hi, Dustin Fitzpatrick. I'm PAG's Air Quality Manager.
Chad?
Chad Lapora. I am the administrator for Tucson Water Source Water Division.
Lee?
Good morning. Oh,
I didn't Leo Mead.
Lee, I'll get to you, Mead, in just a sec.
Lee Comrie, PAG Sustainability Coordinator and Chief Cook and Bottle Washer for the group.
And Crystal? You there, Crystal?
Hi, this is Crystal, PAG Zoom moderator.
And David?
Always pause to make sure there's not more than one David. Yes, David Zenda from PEMA Association of Governments. Nice to be with you all.
Kim?
Kim Franklin with the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum.
Mead?
I'm Mead Meyer Welburn with PEMA Association of Governments, and I'm one of the managers.
Alexa?
Good morning, Alexa Scholl with the Tucson Metro Chamber.
Jameson?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jamie Brown with PEMA Association of Governments. My title is Director of Strategic Planning, Programming, and Policy.
Charles?
Well, hi. Am I off mute? Yes, I am. Hi, Chuck Stack. I'm the Oro Valley EPAC representative. Nice to be here.
Mark?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Mark Novak. Oh, I'm getting feedback on here. I'm Mark Novak with Arizona.
And Roxanne?
Hi, I'm Roxanne. I'm with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. I'm the Community Liaison and Legislative Analyst.
And Frank?
Frank Bunias. I'm with the City of Tucson, Administrator of the Los Feliz Sustainability Campus with the Environmental and General Services Department.
And Becky?
Hi, Becky here. I'm from PAG. I'm the moderator back.
And Dawn?
I'm admin support for PEMA Association of Governments.
And Jeff?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Hildebrand with Computer Administrator for PAG.
And Paula?
Paula Bloomer, Town of Marana.
Abigail?
Abigail Okrant with the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality.
And Catherine?
Good morning, Catherine Rydell with the Arizona Department of Water Resources.
Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. Jennifer Barroso with Southern Arizona Home Builders Association.
And Michael?
Michael Catanzaro, Energy Manager for the City of Tucson.
And it's shifted around a bit. So we're going to go with Ramona.
Good morning, I'm Ramona with PAG staff, and I'm also helping with admin.
Christina? Michael? That's
Hi,
Chris.
Natalie?
For the City of Tucson.
This is Chris McVie with Tucson Audubon. I'm having some problems with
Ramona? Oh, sorry about that. Well, there's been some people who've joined and it has shifted around for me. So if you have not introduced yourself, please unmute and introduce yourself. All right, I think we have everyone then. Thank you all. So we're going to go on to agenda item number 2, the in-kind form. So the regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let them know. Time spent in meetings and preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching. So we are going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the December 2nd EPAC meeting summary. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review that. If you received that in your email, did anybody want to make a motion to approve the meeting summary?
Oh, this is Chuck Stack. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Chuck. And a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes, please unmute and say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the December 2nd EPAC meeting summary has been approved. So we are going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4, the regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We're going to hear from Dustin Fitzpatrick, who is the air quality manager at PAG, and he's going to review the current regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory and present on the process and timeline for updating the report. Go ahead, Dustin.
Thanks, Natalie. Good morning, everybody. So PAG is currently next regional greenhouse gas inventory of Eastern Pima County, which will cover calendar years 2016 through 2021. The inventory covers the community of Eastern Pima with subsets for the community of City of Tucson, and government operations for the City of Tucson, and government operations for Pima County. So the data collection phase for the report was delayed a bit. One reason we're awaiting the release of the Tucson Climate Action Plan, which was adopted March 7th. It was anticipated that that plan could include a refined and more detailed greenhouse gas inventory for City of Tucson government operations. And we didn't want the PAG report to conflict with the new inventory. But the city's plan deferred to the 2019 inventory used in PAG's previous report that was released in June 2021. So now we've completed a collection last month from the City of Tucson of the government operations data that has traditionally been collected for our report. We also received the final data from Pima County wastewater operations this week, which gets included in the county community and county government operations inventories. So now we have all the data for the report. We can move into the tables and graphs creation. But these put us back several months, just comparison to the timeline for the previous inventory. So that's likely going to push back release of the final report, which was due out in the summer, probably into the fall. We also await announcements from Pima County in terms of any climate action plan developments, so that those can be included in the final report if and when they are finalized. So the overall data collected shows emissions reductions during the pandemic in the stationary and transportation sectors. Emissions for the Arizona project were also reduced after 2019. That's due to the closure of the coal-powered Navajo station, which was previously the predominant source of electricity. So the emission calculation methodologies have remained consistent with the exception of on-road and non-road transportation. So previously, the EPA's motor vehicle emissions simulator, or MOVES model, was used to calculate emissions using ADOT motor vehicle emission registration information, along with fuel economy estimates. So firstly, the data we received from MVD in January 20 and in past years was being provided as summarized tables, which had been indicating a car to truck ratio of 79 to 21, with 765,000 registrations for Pima County. Then during the pandemic, MVD switched over their system, got a new vendor, and in June 2021, they provided the data with each individual VIN for vehicles that were registered in Pima County and throughout the state. So we were better able to that data and refine what the vehicle types were. And so the car to truck switched to 46 to 54. So ended up reflecting more cars than trucks. And the registrations went on to 685,000 in Pima County. So that was a net reduction of 80,000 vehicles just from January 2020 to June 2021, based on the data that we were being provided. And the 50 car to truck ratio more reflects what the EPA data has showed for years, which wasn't, the closer to 80-20 car to truck that we were being provided. So despite the overall reduction of vehicles being reported, the greenhouse gas emissions increased in 2021 under the MOVES model runs, just due to the increase in the modeled number of trucks. So secondly, the MOVES is a model that estimates emissions of NAAQS criteria pollutants based on vehicle types and ages and their corresponding emission control systems. So the greenhouse gas is being estimated by multiplying the approximated vehicle miles traveled by the approximated fuel economy for each particular vehicle class. However, last July, FHWA proposed a rule and requested comments to add a new performance measure for greenhouse gas emissions on the national highway system, and that's currently under review. So the proposed performance measure would require state DOTs and MPOs that have national highway system mileage within their boundaries to establish declining CO2 emissions targets, and that is to reduce CO2 emissions generated from on-road mobile sources relative to the reference year 2021, with a goal of achieving by 2050. The approach provided for the state's calculations of CO2 emissions would be to use the fuels and financial analysis highways, which is called the fuels FASH system, in which they report their total annual fuel usage, and then that gets multiplied FHWA supplied emissions factors for CO2 per gallon of fuel. That ends up being a much more straightforward approach to calculate because it's just based simply on how much fuel was burned in a given year. So within our state, ADOT tracks fuel sales for the Highway User Revenue Fund, or HERF, in order to distribute the fuel tax sales. So those fuels that are tracked, gasoline, diesel, and red dye diesel, used by construction equipment or other non-road vehicles. And that allows us to more directly calculate on-road and non-road mobile source CO2 emissions, along with the segregation of our urban boundaries within Pima County, allow for the approach based on the assumption that most of the fuel sold here is used here. So the bottom line is that fuel sales approach will replace the prior MOVES modeling approach for these emissions. And overall, that's showing a bit higher emissions compared to when we were modeling based on MOVES. And last, the EPA climate pollution reduction grants were announced March 1st with a notice of intent to participate, deadline of April 28th. an application deadline, May 31st. So this is a non-competitive grant formula, meaning that the Tucson Metropolitan Statistical Area is eligible for $1 million grant to develop, and the planning grant recipients will be required to develop a climate action plan designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with particular attention to measures that will have benefits for low-income and disadvantaged communities. Each recipient MSA, an organization must be designated to serve as a lead for the grant. That designated organization can be an air pollution control agency, municipality, tribe, or groups of one or more of those entities. So we're looking forward to the greenhouse gas inventory report, including the latest regional developments on that grant as well. So that's my update on the report. As we move along with the draft phase, we'll be getting the draft before EPAC and the Air Quality Subcommittee for review and further analysis. And like I said, the deadline was anticipated for the June meeting, but it's likely going to be pushed back just to the fall.
Okay, thank you so much for that update, Dustin. Just following up on what you were saying about the climate planning grant, this Pima County, DEQ, and the city of Tucson are now working to kind of determine who the lead will be on that. It is non-competitive, and each MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, there's 63 of them that are receiving $1 million in the United States, and each state is being offered $3 million. And we do intend to access that money and actually move forward with the planning that is associated with that. So there will be an update likely at the June meeting on the status of that, since it's all just being negotiated and worked out, discussed at this point, how the roles will be divvied up. So I'll plan to provide an update then. We can definitely open up for questions. I did have a question about, I'm a little bit surprised that your model doesn't account for greenhouse gases. Is there any discussion from EPA about the MOVES model incorporating greenhouse gases into the modeling itself? In addition to the criteria pollutants that are?
Yeah, no, Natalie, it does report out on greenhouse gas emissions. So that's how we kept them for the past report.
Okay.
But the change in approach to using the HER fuel sales, you know, and that was kind of inspired by the federal regulation proposed to track greenhouse gas emissions for the states, and that would be based on fuel sales and consumption. So the MOVES was estimating it, but it's only as good as the data you put in. So you're estimating vehicle miles traveled, and then you're taking the motor registration data. So in the past, if we were showing there were more cars than trucks, then that would show lower emissions. But looking back, comparing using the HER fuel cell we're modeling in MOVES, there's a 16 to 32% increase when you do the HER fuel cells. So I requested that data from ADOT and received the sales for Pima County. And so yes, MOVES does model that, but you know, MOVES' primary intention is to model the criteria pollutants. And so that's really tricky when you need to look at how old the vehicles are and how old the emission controls are and what types they have. And so that's pretty valuable for like our particulate matter and NOx and VOCs and whatnot. So yeah, sorry if it wasn't construed that is provided in MOVES, but that this is a more reliable way because emissions aren't dependent on emission control systems. It's just a gallon of gas burns releases this X amount of CO2. So it's a pretty straightforward approach.
Is it just CO2 that you're calculating? Or
Yeah.
Is there any other? And
the other are the methane and nitrogen oxides are more negligible. as part of a percent of that.
And you're including methane and nitrous oxide in your emissions inventory with the other sources, or is it just carbon dioxide?
We use the ClearPath model, and that fills those in.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any other questions? Charles?
Okay, thank you for that, Dustin. Your focus seems to be very much on the transportation sector. Did you look at any point source emissions of CO2 within Pima County? So the sewage treatment plant called Tres Rios does some pretty cool things. They take their anaerobic digester biogas and they separate the CO2 from the methane. The methane they sell to California and they make a lot of money. It's called renewable natural gas. The CO2 gets vented to the atmosphere, and it's coming out of a pipe. There's ways we could capture that, but I don't know if that's included in any of these inventory calculations. It's probably pretty substantial when you look at the whole operation. That's all.
Yeah, thanks for the comment, Chuck. That's included. We'll talk about that transition at Tres Rios to renewable biogas, but the inventory covers not just the transportation sector, but the stationary energy and wastewater and water, as well as industrial, which is pretty much cement production here.
Anybody else have any other questions? Chris?
Dustin, so does this take into account non-attainment areas like Rayito, talking about industrial cement production, et cetera?
No, Chris, this is not focused on the non-attainment area. It's just an inventory of the overall Eastern Pima County community with subsets for the City of Tucson community and the City of Tucson and Pima County government operations.
And Chris, that's a PM10 non-attainment area, so that would be for that particular criteria, but that it's not attainment, so it's not really associated necessarily with the greenhouse gases.
That's right.
Any other questions? All right, Dustin, thank you so much. I assume in maybe not June, but the following meeting, we might be able to get a review your report when it's finalized. Is that going to be the case?
Yeah, we'll get a review out. Last time we gave a 2-week period, and then prior to that, when the draft was further along, I had presented some of the updated findings and comparisons with the previous report. So we may be able to do that as well, say at the June 1 before the finalization in the fall, later in the year.
Great. Thank you so much. That's really important information for our region and our future planning around this climate change. So it's great that you are doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on. The next agenda item is solid waste reduction planning update. And I was told that we do need to delay this agenda item because our speaker, Carlos de la Torre, had a family emergency and was not able to attend. I see that Frank is here. You're not here in his place, are you, Frank? Just want to make sure that you're not here in his place.
No, not necessarily for this topic.
Okay, so we'll plan to add this to the next agenda for June and get an update on that. So we will be skipping that agenda item. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, which is an invasive species update from Kim Franklin, who is with the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. And she's the conservation science manager and the co-founder of the Sonora Desert Cooperative Weed Management Area, which brings partners together to coordinate invasive species management across Pima County, which is quite a challenge these days. So take it away, Kim.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Kim Franklin. I manage a small science team at the Desert Museum, which is one of our best kept secrets that we actually have a science team. And we focus generally on two issues: invasive species and pollinator conservation. And so today I'm going to talk to you about the grassification of desert shrublands and how that is changing our fire regimes in the Southwest. And I can control my own slides, yeah. Let's see. So the Sonoran and Mojave deserts are relatively new plant assemblages. So meaning if you went back 10,000 years, you would, and you looked at these same places, say the Tucson Mountains, you would find dramatically different combinations of plant species existing in these locations. This means that there is a lot of open niche space, and that is reflected in a lot of bare ground. And invasive grasses have been taking advantage of that open niche space. So you have these grasses, generally two classes. Some are perennials, which are bufflegrass and fountain grass primarily. Big problems in the Sonoran Desert, and then there's a wide range of winter annual invasive grasses, including red brome, Mediterranean grass, cheatgrass, and they are a problem here in the Sonoran Desert as well as throughout the desert Southwest. And so red brome and other invasive winter annual grasses are fueled by winter rains and become abundant when we have consecutive wet winters. They'll take a landscape like this in the Mojave Desert, dominated by Joshua trees, and fill in all that open space. That's on the yellow tannish color is all red brome. And the result after a fire is this. This is from the Sema Dome fire in 2020, which burned one of the largest stands of Joshua trees in the Mojave National Preserve. And it's expected that the vast majority of these plants will not recover from this fire. Then we also have perennial grasses, bufflegrass and fountain grass. They do the same thing. Here's what our slopes in the Tucson Mountains look like right now with this incredible bloom of brittle bush that we're having. Fills in all that open space and outcompetes our native species. And now you have this carpet of fuel that blankets the surface of the desert and results often in fires as well. And our species here in the Sonoran Desert are also, for the most part, not adapted to withstand these fires. So what you have is the conversion of these desert shrublands into grasslands, monotypic grasslands. And this is changing the fire mosaic in our region. So in the past, there was sort of a fire break provided by desert shrublands between these naturally burning ecosystems on our higher elevation locations, including our sky islands, like here in the Catalinas and the Rincon Mountains. And then you'd have this band of desert at the base, but it's being filled in by these grasses, providing connectivity between these higher elevation ecosystems and our cities where we live below. These wildfires tend to be driven by large scale climate oscillations. And in the past, we expect large fires during La Nina events, which tend to be when we experience warmer, drier years. And there's a heightened fire risk in our forests. But now in El Nino years, which tend to experience wet winters, we have this profusion of invasive annual grasses, especially when you have consecutive El Nino events. And these grasses dry out in our hot springs, and by summer you have an immense amount of fuel in the landscape. And so both La Nina and El Nino events are expected to lead to increased fire risk in our region. And the fire risk across the region is expected to increase as a result of climate change generally. So the increase in the length of the frost-free season, increased frequency of wet winters is expected, and the earlier onset of the fire season. But these perennial grasses, in contrast to the annuals, are present on the landscape year-round. We recently ran some state and transition models, and this predicts, we were looking at the next 30 years if we take action to stop the spread of bufflegrass or do nothing and allow bufflegrass to spread, finding that with bufflegrass, the cumulative area burned increases significantly, as well as the average annual burn in these lower elevations below 1,200 meters. So what's happening, this here is a map of bufflegrass in the Front Range of the Catalinas. You can see, can you see my mouse when I'm speaking, Natalie? Is it on the screen?
No, I cannot see it.
Okay. So you have Soldier Canyon there with that big blotch of red to the right. And then that yellow blotch is an area where we had a fire, a bufflegrass fire in 2019 called the Mercer Fire. These patches of bufflegrass continue to grow and they coalesce so that we get larger and larger patches of fuel, and eventually leading to large contiguous blankets of fuel across these desert shrublands. And we're already seeing these grasses leading to increased fire that is spreading fire up into our mountain ecosystem. So in June, here's an example of the Telegraph Fire. It ignited in the desert system, but it spread up into chaparral woodland and to our conifer forests at the highest elevations, consuming almost 200,000 acres. There was the bushfire. Everyone remembers 2020, what a crazy year, not only because of the pandemic and other events, but what a wildfire season. The bushfire ignited next to the Beeline Highway in the desert ecosystem and grew to spread over 200,000 acres. Same year, the Superstition Fire was ignited in the Superstition Mountains in a desert ecosystem and grew to an enormous size. So these fires are already happening here. Australia is ahead of us in terms of the bufflegrass invasion. And just last month in March, they had a 250,000 acre bufflegrass fire that took place almost entirely in a national park in Central Australia. So if you continue to let bufflegrass spread uncontrolled and allow that connectivity to increase, it can result in enormous fires. Because we're experiencing a stink net outbreak right now in Tucson, I wanted to bring this up. Stink net is not a grass. It's an invasive annual flowering plant. It has these very characteristic spherical yellow flowers, so it's very easy to identify. It is also highly allergenic to many people, including when it burns. The smoke can cause respiratory issues. And it's been well established in Maricopa County for the past 5 years or so. And it's just spreading into Tucson. We're seeing some big outbreaks right now. And there are people on the ground trying to get rid of it and mapping where these outbreaks are. So this is the ground zero of the stink net invasion here in Arizona at the Ben Avery shooting range in 2019. That's all stink net there. This is the desert just south of the Ben Avery range. It moves into the undisturbed desert and outcompetes all of our native annual plants. And it's an excellent fuel. When it dries, it provides fuel for fire, and it was the primary fuel of the East Fire in May 2020, which was north of Phoenix near Cave Creek. I had to throw this picture in that I just received late last night. You can see the potential of what could happen if we take no action on stink net. And so I know we have someone from Christina from Tucson Audubon, which is really taking the lead on trying to get ahead of the stink net invasion here in the Tucson region. So thanks to Tucson Audubon for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention that you can report any locations that you see of stinknet at stinknet.org, which is run by Tucson Audubon Society. So you just drop a point on a map wherever you saw it. So highways, the stinknet invasion is coming into Tucson along our highway corridors. And this is a map of the observations of stinknet on iNaturalist in the Phoenix area. And you can see it just follows I-10 down to Tucson. And we have some outbreaks near the Ina and Cortara Road exits. But in general, highways are vectors for invasive plant species. And so I don't have all the answers for how to overcome these challenges, but some of the biggest ones right now are that we don't have budgets big enough to do large scale bufflegrass treatment. Our funding is inconsistent and unpredictable over time. Right now, the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, which is the agency at the state level, which sort of provides some very basic level of coordination of invasive species efforts, has a lot of funding, but that is probably a blip. The funding will decrease in the future. The resources are siloed within agency budgets. We cannot share resources, especially funding, across jurisdictions. And one of the biggest problems is there's a lack of local contractor capacity to carry out this work. So there's a big influx of funding as a result of the infrastructure bill right now. And the problem is spending that money, finding contractors who are capable of doing the type of work that we need done, which bufflegrass work is among the hardest restoration work that anyone could do, harder even than forest thinning with chainsaws. But there is great public awareness of this issue. We've been working with some faculty at the University of Arizona. Most people are aware of bufflegrass. Their greatest concern was fire. And one of the most exciting things was that most people were willing to vote yes on a hypothetical tax to the utility bill to fund efforts to control bufflegrass. And it was very nice to see that this was a bipartisan issue. Both Democrats and Republicans, the yes are in blue there, very similar in their perspectives on this. I just wanted to mention that this survey was done in the year after the Bighorn fire, and public attention quickly moves on to other things. And so you have this window of opportunity after events such as this that we need to be prepared to take advantage of. And so I just wanted to end with this, that, Western cities who are sitting here surrounded by desert shrublands that are becoming grasslands have the most to gain and to lose if we do nothing about this issue. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but we have the technical solutions to these problems. We know how to control these invasive species. What we don't have are the resources to be able to control these species. And I wanted to open it up to the audience in particular. I know PAG is very focused on transportation and air quality issues and water issues. And invasive species always makes it onto the priority list of environmental issues in our region. But no action is really taken on the part of PAG besides putting it onto that list. And my ideas I have for how PAG might help in this issue is through their connections to ADOT and other DOTs throughout the region, including funding for management of invasive species along our right-of-ways, which are these vectors of spread of invasive plant species. But yeah, how do we make this happen? How do we get the state and counties to take action on this issue, which is like so many environmental issues, the threat looms large, but in the distance. And so it's very easy to prioritize other things now, but the cost of dealing with this issue in the future when wildfires are more common and larger is going to be immense. And with that, I would also be happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thanks, Kim. That's pretty grim for sure. Chris, did you have a question?
Yes, Kim, one of the things that frustrates me is the fact that, as you say, highways are vectors in particular, and we are Vandevender and DeMitt in 2006 did their bufflegrass mapping exercise, which I'm sure you're familiar with, showing the spread on the highways. Yet our DOTs do not have mechanisms, not just to address management in the rights of way, but they don't even have a best management practice for washing their tires This goes to flood control, it goes to DOTs, it goes to anybody who's got a fleet that has to get out there and maintain whatever they have to maintain. They literally are spreading these invasives over and over again. And mowing isn't working either, you know?
I agree.
What do we do about that? How can we be helpful in that regard?
Yeah, so I don't know which agency, I imagine be multiple agencies that would be involved in enforcing regulations that require contractors to wash their equipment. The equipment to wash trucks and heavy equipment exists, and it's portable, and it doesn't require much water. You can have a few gallons that you bring with you. Then at the site, if you're at an infested site, you can wash up your truck before you depart. You can, yeah, so it's a matter of figuring out how to enforce those best management practices that exist. And we certainly don't have to reinvent anything.
Oh, no, I mean, I know that it exists in Montana. They use it, well, all over the Midwest and Northeast, they use it for purple loosestrife, very much the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not new.
Yeah, I mean, it would come down maybe possibly to the agencies that are overseeing the construction work, such as Pima County Flood Control, or Arizona Game and Fish has regulations for contractors that are installing utility infrastructure, and all of that equipment needs to be washed down on site when invasive species are present, and contractors need to be held accountable to mitigate or eliminate the invasive species infestations at their construction sites.
If you have any guidance or any examples of language, that would be very helpful. Both the city of Tucson and Pima County are beginning their every decade or so process of updating their comprehensive land use plans and policies. And this is an ideal time to try to better inform best management practices. We get a shot every decade or so. I would love to be able to recommend some specific language in the comments that we provide.
Thank you for that, Chris. I'll send you some, what I have.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Kim?
Hello, Howard Myers here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I just have a thought, or I guess I have a question. Have we approached the school districts and attempted to see if we can have a buffalo grass eradication day for the students? Saba has been very successful with having junior high and high school students attend their annual, I'll refer to it, it's actually titled Construction Career Days. And the students, thousands of them, show up in buses over a 2-day period to attend the free event. So, you know, I know just me personally, when I was in junior high and high school, I would go dig out buffalo grass. I would pretty much do anything to get out of school for a day or two. So have we tried that?
We do outreach with the schools, but no, we haven't tried a buffalo grass day where we get all the students out, and you know, that'd be a great education event. And I think that's how you're seeing it, as an education event, as opposed to accomplishing a significant amount of buffalo grass removal. But that, yeah, that would be fantastic. And it would require some coordination. And you know, I don't know if you are part of part of Saba, if maybe Saba would be interested in helping to provide some resources to accomplish that coordination.
I will I will contact and just see if anybody's interested. I'm certainly interested, but I'm a very small business person.
Okay.
But I am very concerned about this issue and have been, and every chance I get, I reach down and grab out a hunk myself just because. So I'll contact Saba and see
okay,
if anybody would like to participate. But But again, Saba's very successful with kids, junior high and high school kids. They'll do anything to get out of class for a couple of days. And while you may think that they won't clear very much, it will go a long way to maybe cause us adults to say, hey, look at these kids out here. Maybe we should do more. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great idea.
And this is Jennifer with Saba. Thank you for bringing that up, Howard. And I would be happy to bring this up with Saba and brainstorm some ideas, see how we could collaborate on this.
That'd be great, Jennifer. Thank you.
Kim, are there other opportunities? I know there was Buffalo Grass Awareness Month was February, I believe, and you did quite a bit of outreach. Are there any current opportunities where people can participate in just their own way, or maybe recruit volunteers to help out?
Yeah, for sure. You can go to buffalograss.org and you can see a list of all the pools that are taking place across the region. All of our partners list their pools on our website, and you can sign up for one that fits your schedule and your geography. I don't want to minimize the impact of volunteers because, for instance, the Sonoran Desert Weed Whackers, who have been working in the Tucson Mountains for the past 20 years, are the reason why when you drive over Gates Pass to visit the Desert Museum, perhaps, you see no buffalo grass. And so a really, committed volunteers can make a huge difference. It's a different story in the Catalinas and the Rincons, where it provides more favorable habitat and it's much more rugged. But volunteers are definitely stewards of this environment and definitely part of the solution.
Thanks. Anybody else have any other questions for Kim?
One more, just Kim, could you please tell us for the benefit, well, let me just preface this by saying there are many people who are concerned with the use of herbicides in public settings, parks, etc. And there is a movement afoot to, in particular where children may be present, to minimize the use of certain herbicides like glyphosate. That's understandable. However, could you please help us better understand, is there any alternative that works as well on buffalo grass? Because governments and agencies need to realize that the first thing you have to do is get a handle on it. You have to get control of it. Once you begin to get control of it, the amount of herbicide decreases and you can do spot treatments as opposed to generalized treatments, etc. You can begin to reduce and reduce and reduce, but it's constant monitoring. And people who are afraid to use glyphosate in certain areas are, there's no way to avoid damage to private property, homes, infrastructure. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Is there anything that works as well?
There are only, glyphosate is really the center of attention, but there are many herbicides that are much, much more toxic than glyphosate that you potentially could use, but with more collateral damage. With glyphosate, you can spray the individual buffalo grass plant. It degrades quickly. Glyphosate they test for it in our water supply, has never been found. It degrades. It's relatively non-toxic in comparison to the other herbicides that we might choose to use. And the exposure to the public when we're using glyphosate in these wildland settings is nil. There's no exposure to the public. Our biggest concern is that the applicators are not exposed and they are wearing personal protective equipment, and that greatly minimizes their exposure. And so right now, glyphosate remains like the best option for attacking massive stands of buffalo grass in our wildlands. And there's other ways that you can control weeds in our urban settings that are, much more manageable than, say, Coronado National Forest or Saguaro National Park.
Right. So when you send me the other stuff on best management practices for cleaning equipment, could you please send me language to that effect so that I can share that as well with folks that perhaps don't have that bigger picture. Very much appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Kim, for that
Oh,
information.
thank you.
And I know this is a topic that will be ongoing, so I'm sure we'll be having you back very soon. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is number 7, the PFAS update with Chad Lapora from Tucson Water, and he is the current administrator for the Tucson Water's Source Water Division. He's also served at the City of Tucson's TARP project coordinator for the past 10 years. Go ahead and take it away, Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Good morning, everybody. I am going to provide an update for the PFAS impacts as it relates to the EPA Superfund site. All right. Let's try this again here. There we go. All right, my presentation outline will talk about the general orientation at TARP, PFAS discovery and management to date, impacts to the TARP remedy and Tucson Water Resources, increasing PFAS concentrations, and continued proactive responses by the city. All right, general orientation. In 1994, the original packed column aeration towers and that treatment plant went into operation. Packed column aeration is a fairly simple technology that uses packing media in towers. The water trickles down from the top, forced air is blown from the bottom, and that process is able to strip VOCs like TCE from the water. That process worked well until 1,4-dioxane was discovered in the early 2000s. The TARP system then included 9 remediation wells. We've since added a 10th well. As you can see in the map, the 5 wells in the North Well field are for plume containment. They generally range from about 1,000 to 1,300 gallons a minute. Higher production, higher capacity to maintain plume capture. The wells in the south are much smaller in capacity, ranging from about 50 to about 350 gallons a minute. They were designed to remediate the highest concentrations of TCE in the plume at the time. As I mentioned, in the early 2000s, 1,4-dioxane was discovered in the plume. 1,4-dioxane is a stabilizer for the solvent TCE. In 2014, the Advanced Oxidation Process, or AOP plant at TARP went into operation. That process is able to treat for both TCE and 1,4-dioxane. As I also mentioned, in 2022, we added a 10th well to expedite remediation of the plume. That also necessitated some expansion of the plant to include additional UV reactors and carbon vessels, among other things. In 2023, actually, we're in the process of completing construction to send treated TARP water into the recycled water system. It's already being charged to the Santa Cruz River in accordance with our AZIPTES permit. All right, so there's a lot going on with this slide, but just as a recap, we have 2 well fields, the north and the south. That water is collected from the wells and sent in its own distinct distribution system directly to the TARP plant, the TARP AOP facility for treatment. In general, we do some sediment removal. We dose the water with hydrogen peroxide and expose it to UV light. This is a proven technology that creates hydroxyl radicals, a strong oxidant that breaks those chemical bonds. There is no waste stream associated with this process. The one thing that I want to point out now is that the GAC contactors associated with this plant were originally designed to quench any residual hydrogen peroxide as part of the AOP process. They weren't originally designed to do any kind of PFAS treatment. So I just kind of want to say that up front. We have largely or entirely actually bypassed the original PAC column aeration towers because the AOP can complete all the treatment, or it treats for both TCE and 1,4-dioxane. Off to the purple there, you can kind of see that that's kind of where we're heading. We are in the final, as of this week, we're in the final testing, operational testing, to be able to send TARP treated water into Tucson Water's recycled water system. We have been busy out there constructing. We have a recycled water system take and booster station that is in the final stages of construction and will allow us to do that. This is kind of a good couple maps here to kind of illustrate what the plume looked like back in 1987 prior to the TARP plant going into operation. You kind of get a good idea of what the TCE concentrations look like. As of the early 2020s, you can kind of get a much better idea of how much remediation has occurred over the 20-25 years since the plant's been in operation. Well, it didn't end with TCE and 1,4-dioxane, as many of you know. PFAS was discovered, and Tucson Water has had to go through a lot of let's see what we got here. We've had to go through a lot of different measures and responses to deal with PFAS, and so just kind of want to start this out. Back in 2009, EPA had a provisional health advisory for PFOA and PFOS. You can say we're at 400 and 200 parts per trillion respectively. Those were relatively high standards compared to what we are today. In 2013, 2014, Tucson Water did do some sampling at the plant in using our Sentry program. So we had some kind of idea that PFAS was in existence, but it was well below any of the provisional health advisories. The game changer occurred in May of 2016 when the EPA issued a health advisory for PFOA and PFOS. You had to add them together. They couldn't exceed 70 parts per trillion. Between 2016 and 2018, Tucson Water did continuing monitoring of PFAS in the system. 2018 to 2019, other measures were being taken to include how we operated our wells. We were doing blending, and then we also began changing out the GAC. And so the carbon that was originally at the plant for hydrogen peroxide quenching was expected to last 5 to 10 years. When we realized that we could also use that carbon to both quench residual hydrogen peroxide and remove PFAS, that got expedited quite a bit. We did do some bench scale testing to identify the optimum carbon to both remove PFAS and quench hydrogen peroxide. Our PFAS mitigation evaluations began. 2019 to 2021 continued to change out the carbon. It's been on average about 2 times a year. June of 2021, that was a key date. That is when, due to abundance of safety and understanding that our AOP plant was not designed to remove PFAS, the city of Tucson Water, in coordination with the agencies, stopped delivering potable water to the system. We began construction of an outfall to the Santa Cruz River, and operations continued in November when we were able to finally put that water into the Santa Cruz River. In June of 2022, another interim health advisory issued that had PFOS and PFOA at less than a part per trillion, a very low standard. 21 to 23, as I said, outfall to the Santa Cruz River. That outfall was completed. Discharge began in November. And then we're also currently working on infrastructure to send that water into the recycled water system. And for those of you who aren't aware, in March, the EPA issued new proposed MCLs for these 6 PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS, individually at 4 parts per trillion. The other 4 will use a hazard index, which kind of assesses the concentrations of all 4. Slide. Impacts to the TARP remedy and Tucson water resources. The changes necessitated for Tucson Water to deal with PFAS. We've had to do frequent PFAS monitoring. We had the foresight to purchase the equipment, train our staff, and get methods approved by the Arizona Department of Health Services. We are able to run all our own PFAS analyses in-house. That has been a big boost because we can get results back within a couple of days, whereas if we were to send samples out to private labs, it would take up to 2 months to get sample back. This allows us to be much more reactive in how we deal with PFAS. As I also mentioned, some of the other changes, we're swapping out GAC media at an increased pace as if we didn't have to deal with PFAS. And then we also ceased delivery of treated water to the potable water system. With support from the EPA, we've restricted some use of the wells. Most of this pertains to the South well field, which is much higher at this point in PFAS. We've also implemented treated water infrastructure along the Santa Cruz to discharge and discharge into the recycled water system. Okay, efforts and costs. GAC process. Like I said, the GAC was originally designed to last about 5 years. It was 5 to 10 years before it would need to be replaced. And it wasn't intended for any PFAS absorption. At this point, back in 2018, we added an additional 4,000 pounds of GAC to the existing vessels. We've since added 4 new vessels to account for the production from the new well. And so we currently have 12 carbon contactors to remove PFAS. We do weekly sampling of those GAC contactors to ensure that we are aware of what the concentrations are as they work their way through the carbon, so that we can monitor changeouts. As you can see, we've done several changeouts since we began in December of 2018. I think we've got 6. We'll be approaching our 7th sometime this year. Challenges: PFAS impacts to TARP are increasing. Tucson Water's committed to treated water quality. Potable demands can be met without TARP water, and the flexibility is needed to effectively manage all city water resources. The response: new infrastructure to direct that TARP treated water to the Santa Cruz River and the recycled water system. Designing and constructing that Santa Cruz River outfall and the infrastructure needed to put the water into the recycled water system. There's ongoing regulatory coordination with the agencies, final completion this summer. Increasing PFAS concentrations. So these are graphs showing the increasing PFAS concentrations. In this case, we were looking at PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS in the four of the North well field wells. So we know that concentrations are increasing. This map was put together by ADQ. Basically, what the takeaway here is there's a lot of PFAS coming toward the tar plant in very large concentrations. So when we're compared to a healthy or a proposed MCL of 4 parts per trillion, we can see PFAS in excess of 10,000 parts per trillion. That's kind of what we're up against. Continuing proactive response by the city. So one of the reasons why PAG reached out is they had heard that Tucson Water received a $25 million grant from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. We are using that money to design and construct an ion exchange treatment system. It will be a pre-treatment system. It will be on the front end before the water goes into the AOP plant. But this will allow us to specifically treat for PFAS as opposed to what we're currently doing, the AOP plant that was not specifically designed to remove PFAS. So this will allow us to restore that existing GAC to its original purpose. And then also as part of that process, we will also have to enhance raw water sediment removal to protect that ion exchange and other processes. And so again, we got that support from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. In about a year's time, about a year from now, we will have final design completed. And then at that point, we hope to go into construction. And I think the timeline is about to have that construction completed in about 3 years' time from now. And that is where we stand today. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. A very an excellent, comprehensive, and sobering presentation you gave, Chad. I'm curious about the ultimate disposal of contaminated residues. We have the granular activated carbon, and now we're going to have the accumulation of PFAS onto the ion exchange. How are these residuals ultimately disposed of in this process?
I can tell you from the experience at TARP. So the first time that we removed carbon from the system, and that was the carbon that was originally installed in 2014. That carbon was in there, had been in there just long enough where it was really difficult to get out. They had to basically destroy that carbon. But all the carbon since is thermally regenerated. And as far as the ion exchange media is concerned, I'll be honest with you, I don't really have any experience how that is dealt with, but once that system is in place, we'll know. But just know that they do come out to the plant, they remove the old carbon, and then it's shipped back to, in this case, Calgon's facility for regeneration.
Thank you. Chad, is the thermal regeneration destructive of PFAS?
My understanding is that carbon, that carbon can be reused. So however the PFAS is removed, they're able to capture that part of it. And that carbon is then reused. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Chris?
Thank you, Chad. I'm very interested in your presentation. I appreciate your thoroughness. I'm wondering if you have done any studies or if you intend to do any studies regarding the impact of putting this treated water into the Santa Cruz River. In particular, I ask because we do have endangered species now established in the river. So I'm wondering what, if any, data you've gathered prior to treatment or insertion of treated water and post-treatment. Do you have plans for that?
That is a good question. I'm not sure that I entirely understand the question. What I can tell you is that we do have the water that we discharge into the Santa Cruz River. It is of drinking water quality. We're removing all TCE, 1,4-dioxane, PFAS. We are in compliance with our AZIPDES permit. I know that I'm trying to remember the professor. I thought his name was Paul, and anyway. We do have some folks at the U of A who are interested in not only at this outfall, but also with our heritage outfall of kind of looking at how this water discharge to the Santa Cruz River affects the ecosystem.
But you don't know if there's any actual plan for pre and post testing.
As pre-post testing for what? I guess that's probably what I'm.
Well, for impacts to the ecosystems. So currently, in particular with the heritage program, and I know we have an A+ effluent stream, I'm aware of that.
Right.
But that does not get rid of all pharmaceuticals, for example.
Right.
And PFAS is cumulative, just like many of these pharmaceuticals are.
Mm-hmm.
So we have endangered species currently in the river.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be some monitoring ongoing of them, I would think. And I'm wondering, so that would be the pre-insertion of this other treated water. And are there plans to continue to monitor and test post-insertion of the treated water? Just for compliance with our incidental take permit, I would think that that would be something that the county would be interested in. Let alone the city, in terms of potential issues that the city could encounter. So I'm just curious as to what kind of monitoring you're doing and plan to do.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the monitoring, and there may be others who probably might be a little bit more knowledgeable, but all that I'm aware of right now when you say monitoring is that obviously we're monitoring the quality of the discharged water. The U of A may be involved, and I can't remember the U of A professor, I'm drawing a blank. He may be, I know that he's a biologist who's doing some assessment of the impacts of this discharged water, but I'm not really aware of anything else.
Okay,
I'm not
well, thank
saying
you very
there's
much.
not, but I'm not aware of anything else.
Mead.
I was going to follow up on Chris's suggestion and say that maybe we could, at a future meeting, invite Marie Light or that U of A professor to speak more to it, because I know Marie has been tracking at PDQ any environmental studies that are available about its impact and tracking the federal guidance too, and that it seems like it's still in development, trying to figure out the specific impact on what.
Yeah, there might be some folks more knowledgeable than I am on that part of it, who could provide more detail.
Really appreciate you presenting. I wanted to say that Chad also presented to our local wastewater providers recently, so we're trying to help promote coordination across the region, and there was discussion in that group about the even newer regulations on wastewater discharges that are different than the water quality discharges the water quality regulations for potable water. So for wastewater, they're looking into best management practices to prevent it from entering the waste stream. So that's another topic that might be of interest because it's related.
Yeah, and I would just like to real quick finish up with saying that, Tucson Water has done a lot of monitoring for PFAS in our service area. We've done an incredible amount of proactive sampling. I feel confident in saying that. We're kind of in the early stages of moving forward with, we've monitored, but now trying to remediate and contain some of the PFAS plumes that we have. Obviously, the one at TARP is a fairly sizable PFAS plume. And then for those who don't know, a lot of this PFAS is from firefighting foam coming off of the Arizona Air National Guard and the Tucson International Airport. So, but we also have PFAS plumes coming off of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We've worked cooperatively with ADQ to get an ion exchange treatment system just outside the base, and we're currently working on installing another ion exchange system in Randolph Park to both remediate and contain that plume. And so all of this remediation is, it definitely is costly, but that's kind of the phase Tucson Water's in. We were able to shut off, our system has enough resiliency where we were able to shut off a lot of our potable production wells that had been impacted by PFAS. But the next step is to start remediating where we can. And so that's kind of the next steps for us.
Chad, are you involved with what's happening to prevent these toxic chemicals from being put onto the ground? This has been going on for decades now, and at some point, that would be addressed.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, there's efforts to phase out, most of the airports, the Air Force Base, the Air National Guard, they understand that they have to use different product than what they've been using. But it's been decades, probably 50 years of using these PFAS chemicals. And so, and I can see Roxanne is on the call. She may be able to talk to it more. ADQ's more in the regulatory part of it, but Tucson Water have had to react to a lot of what's out there.
You have more to add to that, Roxanne?
Yeah, I do. So actually in, was it 2019? 2020, there was a bill passed in the Arizona legislature forbidding fire departments from using AFFF. Obviously, it's taken a while. So we actually have a program this year. We were, it's kind of a pilot to use $300,000 for 24, maybe it was 25 fire departments, where we're taking in 5,000 gallons of their stockpiled AFFF and replacing it with an appropriate replacement. And then we're going to deal with the disposal of the AFFF. So we're doing that this year. We should have results come at the end of the fiscal year, I believe. I should probably check in with my ERU unit before I promise that. But yeah, it's also fire departments are struggling because the federal government military hasn't set out their specs for replacement firefighting foam that doesn't contain PFAS yet. So replacements aren't certified at the federal government level, but they're trying their best to do them. And I know City of Tucson Fire Department has found a company that actually produces a foam that does better and doesn't use PFAS, and they're purchasing that, but it is expensive.
Well, hopefully the new thing has been better tested, that it's not going to be just another new problem. Chuck,
Right.
did you have one more thing you wanted to say?
Yeah, the U of A professor I think you're talking about is Dr. Ian Pepper. Dr. Pepper, as we call him, is the director of the West Center, U of A Water and Energy Sustainable Technology Center. And if you just Google Ian Pepper, you'll get all of his contact information. I've done research with West Center this last semester with chemical engineering. He's just a great fellow. He and I have talked a lot about PFAS remediation. So he's really a fantastic resource for you in this group if you need one. Yeah,
I am aware of Dr. Pepper. I actually took a college course from years and years ago, but the professor that we've been working with is I just know his first name is Paul, but he, like I said, he's more of a biologist, and he's been working more with kind of the impacts of the discharge water and how it's affected the riparian habitat and the ecosystem within the storm channels or the water. So I'll have to get that name. I know who to ask, but can't remember it right now. So
I can't remember his last name either, but he's looking at species increases in abundance and diversity of dragonflies, all
Right.
kinds of different pollinators, birds, insects, etc. So yeah, I know who you're talking about, Chad.
Okay.
Another good source. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
Excellent.
Okay, it looks like, well, we do have one more agenda item. So Melanie, you have one more thing you want to add? We're going to move on.
Yes, just a very quick question. I believe I saw on one of the slides that the goal continues to be 0 PFAS and water coming out of TARP. But I thought I saw something about an MCL or something about 4 parts per trillion. I was just curious if there has been or will be any discharges to the river that do have at least some detectable PFAS, or if it continues to be non-detect.
No, that's a good question. So as we're operating right now, there is some very small detects of one of the PFAS compounds. It's not PFOA and PFOS. It's actually PFHXS. Generally speaking, that is kind of the first PFAS compound that breaks through. But once we see that it breaks through, that's when we will kind of shut down that carbon contactor. So there are some small detects, but they're usually in the range of overall 2 to 3 parts per trillion. So below any proposed MCL, and so very, very minor at this point.
All right, thank you.
Me, go ahead.
I was wondering if the name of the professors we were looking for was Michael Bogan or
Oh, that's it.
Is
Yeah,
that
Michael Bogan.
Okay.
Yep.
And there's also
I said-
Dr. Paul Marsh, if there's a Paul you are thinking of, who does fish studies.
Yeah, I had Paul. I thought Paul, but you're right. It's Michael Bogan.
Okay.
So for everybody, that's that guy right there.
Great, got it for minutes.
Thank you.
All right, well, there's definitely plenty to talk about on this topic, and we really appreciate you giving us that update, Chad, and I'm sure we'll be having more information on this in future meetings as well. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, which is PAG's carbon reduction strategies with David Zinda, who is the program and policy coordinator at PAG, and he's going to provide information on the draft carbon reduction strategies identified by PAG pursuant to the federal guidelines. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm David Zinda, as introduced program and policy coordinator here at PEMA Association of Governments. And it is so great to join you this morning at EPAC. I've been a long-time listener, first-time caller today. I am accompanied by Jamie Brown, Director of Strategic Planning, Programming and Policy, and my esteemed and fearless leader. And we're going to just provide a brief update on PAG's carbon reduction strategies, just as we did as a part of a presentation to Regional Council last month. Out of habit, just so you know, I may refer to carbon reduction program as CRP. That's what I'm talking about, and I'll try to define my acronyms as I go along. There we go. Control of slides are looking good. All right, so the carbon reduction program funding is administered by the Federal Highway Administration as a part of the Federal Aid Highway Program. It is Highway Trust Fund Contract Authority out of the same rock as Surface Transportation Block Grants, Transportation Alternative Program, National Highway Performance Program, and so forth, all administered by ADOT. It's important to emphasize that this program was established by the 2-year-old Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's just a toddler. And so in the world of federal funding programs, the CRP is somewhat new, since it can take years after a new program is established for all pieces to be put in place before full implementation. The state of Arizona through the Arizona Department of Transportation, received an apportionment of CRP funding provided by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. ADOT is the sole agency in the state that leads the carbon reduction program. It is also required of ADOT by law to develop a carbon reduction strategy by November 2023. ADOT is furthermore required to work with MPOs like PAG in developing this strategy. It's important to emphasize that there is currently no statewide strategy, so we are in a transition period. We're actively trying to get that together. These strategies could vary a lot by state, since the state is a designated lead on developing carbon reduction strategies to reduce transportation-related emissions. What ultimately ends up in a strategy in Arizona may look very different from other states as well. Once there is a carbon reduction strategy produced by ADOT and approved by the United States Department of Transportation, the outlined strategies should be incorporated into both the state and the MPO, that is PAG's long-range transportation plan. In our case, that is the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan. Over the next few years, I will suspect that we'll see several elements of the CRP be reflected in our updated 2055 RMAP. ADOT is in the early phases of developing the carbon reduction program strategy. Some of these eligible activities that both ADOT and FHWA have approved for the Pima Association of Governments are listed at the bottom of the slide. Thus, the activities on the slide will help us collect transportation system performance data to inform regional alternative transportation modes, needs, and priorities. These efforts are CRP eligible and can be integrated into the long-range transportation plan and support regional priorities as required by law. So the idea here is for regional analysis that can support effective and verifiable carbon reduction program strategies and outcomes. So in effect, we're going to collect relevant data enshrined carbon reduction strategies as outlined by the state. We're going to use this data to analyze and identify where the biggest needs are and where the biggest difference can be made. We're going to build a process to monitor, track, and evaluate strategies that are to be employed so that we can measure the impact of these strategies. This is an opportunity for regional solutions in collaboration with the state. Moving on. With that in mind, I wanted to highlight another couple of points from the memo that was included to this group. MPOs do play a crucial role in transportation planning and decision-making. It's what we do, right? And this is likely why the FHWA has prioritized MPOs like PAG and partnering with state departments of transportation to develop a statewide carbon reduction strategy. It is important to note that carbon reduction is among the new transportation planning emphasis areas for MPOs as dictated by FHWA and FTA, which highlights the importance of MPOs in leading these regional efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from on-road sources. As an MPO, PAG has a lot of experience in engaging the public and building support for regional plans and initiatives. And certainly we will continue to play a key role in developing carbon reduction strategies as we develop other plans, such as the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, that's our long-range transportation plan. In addition, maybe our long-range transit plans. And these will ultimately need to incorporate the state outlined CRP strategies. Because of our role in producing such plans, we do have a comprehensive understanding of the regional transportation system and travel behavior. We also have access to planning funding that can support the eventual deployment of these strategies. So to sum it all up, the state of Arizona is taking the lead on developing a state carbon reduction strategy with collaboration from Arizona's MPOs like PAG as required by law. So during this transition phase, we have been in contact frequently and for a while now with ADOT and FHWA to evaluate carbon reduction program eligible items. As we continue forward in the development of a statewide strategy, PAG is actively trying to set up this carbon reduction program for success in our region. To that end, we want to build a good foundation for the program to lead to demonstrated outcomes and results. before we break ground on anything with any potential CRP funding, we want to ensure we fully understand where the needs are and how to best address those needs in line with what the state has outlined in the state carbon reduction strategy. But before we can really roll out PAG's regional strategies, we first need to wait for the finalization of the state carbon reduction strategy, hopefully at or shortly after November 2023. With that, that kind of concludes my brief remarks, just to update you on where we're at in this process.
Thank you, David. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to throw it out to the committee to see if anybody has any questions first. Okay, I guess I will ask my questions. So PAG has already received $2.1 million this year that was incorporated into your overall work program. And so you have that money already. What are you spending that money on, and how is it reducing carbon emissions in our region?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for your question. Certainly, like I said, new programs such as this one can take several years to formally establish as we await further guidance from regulations, ADOT and FHWA. So with this 2 years of transition, we've tried to get ahead of the curve by setting the program up for success. As was indicated in the last slide, this is really building out kind of that planning framework to best address how we can implement this funding and other potential resources at a large scale in our transportation plans. And that comes from, once again, making sure we have the right data to understand where the needs are, being able to analyze and put that data to work, and be able to incorporate into our long-range plans goals that are going to help reduce carbon emissions for the long run. I think once they're incorporated in these long-range plans, we're going to get, in some sense, the biggest bang for our buck. Mr. Brown, do you have anything further to add on that?
So that sounds
Excuse
like
me.
personnel.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
No,
I was
I'm
going to
just
just try.
go.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, David. So, yeah, that is correct. Because we were awaiting a decision and a strategy from the state, and we had the funds. We did, and we also had in our work program that was approved by the Regional Council in August of 2021, we had a placeholder of future federal funding. And so in cooperation with ADOT and Federal Highways Administration, we looked at existing programs and initiatives in our work program that are CRP eligible. So that includes, for example, van pool subsidies. That includes also the work that's being done on transportation alternatives planning for our long-range plan.
Roxanne?
It started to sound like it does take years, but it sounded like that 2 million that you're asking about how they spend it is just basically personnel and maybe data acquiring.
If I'm Madam Chair, Ms. Lindsay, it's going to be a mix. That is correct. It's going to be a mix of personnel, data acquisition, consultants, subsidies for van pool program, and things like that.
Okay, so you are using that for the subsidies. What about TRP? That is under the van pools under TRP, right?
That's correct. That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
So Jamie, I would just hope that, I know that COVID kind of put the kibosh on things like the van pool program and ride sharing and things like that were difficult. But I would hope with that amount of money that we would see much more service that's offered. As far as I've heard from my colleagues at PAG, that many of those programs have actually the participation in those programs has been much reduced over the years. And so being that those programs have already been funded with other sources, now that there's new funding sources, I believe it will be important to actually see some progress in actually improving the participation in programs like rideshare and the van pool program. And many of the things that you listed are programs that are already funded. And so it'll be really important that you have some interaction with the jurisdictions through your committee structure to get that input and be reporting out so that we can make sure that the target of actually reducing emissions from the transportation system, as is the goal of this program, is actually met. And there are many, other people outside of PAG that are, have expertise in this field. And since we are, PAG is made up of member jurisdictions, I think it will be really important for the member jurisdictions to be involved through their committees to ensure that we are all working together to maximize how these funds are used.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Chair, thank you for that comment and for that suggestion. It is our intent, as David was saying, to monitor, track, and evaluate through this process and work collaboratively. So we will, interact with our member agencies and these committees throughout this process. So.
Great. Chris?
Thank you. Jamie, it's so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Chris.
Oh, I guess you can't see me. I'll turn my camera on. So you say you're waiting for the state and federal highways, but the guidance document that has been released regarding these funds is really clear. In item 7, in terms of the things that the federal government is suggesting need to be incorporated, includes climate change and sustainability. And it's very specific in terms of the types of projects that can be incorporated. So one of the things that occurs to me is the city council just had a conversation regarding funding sources for continuing to offer free transportation on Suntran to enable, in particular, folks who have historically been underserved to get to and from work, things of that nature. Have you considered those kinds of projects? Because certainly that would be a worthy option for reducing individual transit costs and promoting mass transit, as opposed to just paving more roads and widening roads.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, I'll maybe see if David wants to answer that, and I can chime in.
Sure, yes. Thank you for your question, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Certainly, that would be one option, but I think we are still just awaiting what the state is prioritizing and how to use these funds and how that's going to align with their further goals. Once again, we are in that transition period, and before we really pin down and look at specific projects that we can implement, I think we want to make sure we understand, once again, how this money can best be used, as well as other funding sources. And that will come as a part of our larger planning process, which will certainly incorporate a variety of our member jurisdictions, just as the production of the RMAP requires, and other things along those lines.
So you will be using the guidance document to inform the types of programs that you will eventually make choices between. Is that correct? You will be looking at equity, social justice, things of that nature?
Yes, thank you for your question. We certainly hope to do that. And based on our discussion with ADOT staff, where feasible, we're going to integrate all those things, such as Justice 40, which is certainly alluded to in that document. And we've been using some tools to identify those high need areas, in particular for other initiatives like RTA Next.
Anyone else have any other questions?
Not a question. I just want to follow up for Chris's, given the new governor and her new director for ADOT, which is probably part of the delay. Many agencies are struggling with getting new directors and then having to go through the nomination process. But that should help alleviate your concerns about EJ and sustainability. That wasn't the other question you said. It's EJ and
climate resilience. Yeah, and
climate
social.
resilience. Yeah, those should be filtering through and being addressed.
Thank you, Roxanne. That is a good point and encouraging. I guess, Jamie, my question to you then is also, what happens if RTA Next isn't funded? How will you go forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, members of the committee, if RTA Next isn't funded in terms of the CRP funding, I guess just to clarify your question, I'm not quite sure the connection with RTA Next.
Yes. in
Okay.
regards to, in particular, the CRP funding.
Yeah, thank you. So my understanding is that unless, the next 5-year surface transportation bill, rescinds the requirements of CRP and CRP continues, then PAG as an MPO will continue to get a sub-allocation of the CRP. And so we'll continue to, in coordination with ADOT, deliver on the strategies within the state's CRP strategy. So I don't believe that the outcome of RTA Next will have an impact on our carbon reduction approach to carbon reduction strategies, as David outlined. David, do you have anything that contradicts that? Does that align with your understanding as well?
That's correct. That's what I
Thank
believe
you.
as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Okay, David, very good presentation. I don't think I heard you talk about electric vehicles or recharging stations. The White House, the new initiative now is basically working to eliminate, hydrocarbon fueled vehicles in the next 20 years, I think. But is that a component of your plan? And I think that's an interesting thing, because Tucson recently is landing battery plants also up in Phoenix. So Arizona's sort of becoming a leader in the transition away from hydrocarbon transportation fuels to electric. Just briefly, I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Stack, thank you for your question. So certainly in terms of some of the eligibilities of CRP as they exist on paper, it does look like conversion of fleet vehicles to electric vehicles, say for different agencies, might be an option. Once again, I think from our perspective, we're kind of just waiting on the state, and we're kind of just slowly building this as we get more details and information and find out what our priorities are. More to your question, though, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act did authorize a new funding source, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI is what I've typically seen it is called. That funding is largely in the hands of ADOT. So as an MPO, we don't see that, we don't administer it. So that might have several exciting funding opportunities to be able to make that transition. I was trying to remember if I had anything else to add. It was something you said, but I think that's it. But if there's anything else you would like to know, I can try to best answer.
Chris, did you have something else you wanted to say, or is that from earlier? Hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's from earlier.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay, I just wanted to make a recommendation. When I started in this job, I was asked to be the chair of the Air Quality Subcommittee of EPAC. And that's been almost 2 years now, and we've had no meetings. So I would like to propose starting up or having Air Quality Subcommittee, and maybe considering that as a forum for technical expertise on this, bringing together people who are interested in the topic. And we have a lot going on with the city's climate change plan, with the climate planning money that's coming in, with the CRP money that's now in. So there's a lot of movement with EVs and all the other kind of topics that surround climate change planning and carbon reduction. So I think that if we're going to do this in a regional way, it would be great to bring together those technical experts first in a format like the Air Quality Subcommittee. So I would just want to formally request that that actually happen sometime soon. Is that possible?
It is definitely possible. And I think post this meeting, we should certainly have a discussion of that, like the timing of that versus the next meeting, or whether we do a joint meeting or a focus group. So I think, yeah, we can definitely, yes.
Great.
Madam Chair, this is Chris. I think that's a great idea. And I would like to also request that we get updated fairly routinely at EPAC, in these meetings, as well as to exactly how the carbon reduction funds are being spent and what the planning process is, so that we can reach out to the larger public in terms of doing our educational outreach and be supportive.
I would just add to that, in addition, I would like to see some carbon reduction analysis of the what's being funded with the money. PAG is in the position as the planning agency and the air quality planning agency and transportation modeling, that you are able to actually do that kind of analysis. So I would hope that an emissions analysis is done for the actual projects that are being funded with this, so we can actually see what the quantifiable impact of these funds are in our region.
If I may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, just to that point, it is our desire to build a process to monitor, track, and evaluate. So hopefully, our understanding aligns with what you're looking for as well. Thank you.
We will look forward to seeing that in future meetings. Thank you so much, Jamie and David, for filling us in on that topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are at the end of our agenda here. Agenda item number 9, future agenda items. Does anyone have any suggested future agenda items that you would like to see included in future EPAC meetings?
I note from the minutes that we had mentioned Dr. Laura Norman and a couple of others, and I'm wondering what the status is. Have we reached out to invite them?
Not at this time. I know one of the things we also talked about is watershed planning subcommittee also picks up some of those items. So I think post this meeting we'll have a lay down and chat about options, but no, not at this time.
We should definitely revisit those previous suggestions for next meeting then. Chuck?
Oh, thank you. I would definitely like to see the air quality subcommittee added to the agenda formally. I think that's a really excellent idea. And that breaks some of the techno geeks like myself out from the ongoing discussions on policy and funding. And we could, I would volunteer to serve on the air quality subcommittee myself. So if that were on the agenda, I'd like to see that.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. We'd like to have you. Anything else?
Did Roxanne have something?
Oh, no, I was just smiling at agreeing about the air quality subcommittee, and I was thinking to myself, Pima County DEQ has a corollary that started from air quality. It's called EPAC, and I was thinking of the members on there who would probably pop over to the air quality subcommittee. So I was in my own head.
Yeah, but you're right. There are some really good technical experts on that committee, so they would definitely could be helpful in that effort as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to, before we adjourn, a little shameless plug here. Cyclovia is this weekend, so they will be closing down the roads. You can check out cycloviatucson.org to see the route, and PDEQ Clean Air Program, as well as many other organizations will be there. So I would just encourage you to check out that website, and it's on Sunday from 9 to 3. You can make it. We'd love to see you there. Stop by the Clean Air Program tent. And with that, I'm just going to call the meeting to adjournment. We don't have to vote on that, right, Lee?
I think you do.
Oh, we do? All right. Who would like
to move to adjourn?
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, all right. With that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye, all.
Bye-bye.